Imagine this, a co-op shooter by a well-known company that excels in narrative, story-heavy games where the fans mostly talk about how they love the shared world and immersive gameplay, and has no proven experience in making a solid multiplayer game. Makes one and it perishes instantly. Welcome back, Anthem. But maybe we're being a bit unfair. To Anthem, that is. After all, you know what Anthem is and what it meant. It still, to this day, regularly gets brought up when talking about all the disastrous decisions. From having a studio that excels in narrative single-player games try to make an Iron Man live service game, to the belief at the studio in BioWare magic that no matter what goes on behind the scenes at the last moment, the game will pull a Todd Howard and just work. FBC Firebreak came out 2 weeks ago or one Concord ago, and I already feel like I'm exhuming a corpse. I could take some time and effort to fully explain what this game is, but I refuse to put any more effort into it than the studio that made it. That studio being Remedy. Don't know who that is? Don't worry, in 5 years, everyone will feel the same, as they're one Veilguard away from journalists being baffled by inexplicable layoffs and studio shutdown that nobody ever could have foreseen, unless we're doing it right now. Are we already at the point, Remedy? No, not quite. Not quite yet. Soon. TM? Alan Wake, Control, Max Payne. You've heard of these games, right? You've heard good things about them, right? Never played them? They have the cultural impact of freedom fries. You know they're probably good. You've heard of them. Some people over there, they really like it, but nobody can actually explain where it comes from and why it even happened. But it probably has something to do with the French. Remedy made one horror game a lot longer ago than I thought they did. Like a lot longer ago. No, seriously. For some reason, I was under the impression Alan Wake was a pretty recent game. That someone I knew was talking it up like, hey, this feels like a game from the days when survivor horror games used to be good. Don't look it up. It ruined my day. It doesn't have to ruin yours too. And unlike BioWare, it doesn't feel like they were throwing their pedigree away to make an abomination like FBC Firebreak, because they didn't have much of one to begin with. Oh, that's not fair. We still love Remedy. Do we still love Remedy? We're about to tear it down? No, not quite yet. Soon. TM. So while Anthem was a shock to AAA games that is still talked about to this day as an example of what a AAA studio is not to do, only for every AAA studio to do this exact same thing 100 times over, Mind's Eye has already flown off the daily gaming topics list of things people mildly care about. Did I say Mind's Eye? Let's get through this before the knowledge this game ever existed goes to the same void FBC is going to go to when it gets future endeavored in the very near future. FBC Firebreak is basically Control but with 3 people. Now that sounds pretty awesome. You have a game with a big audience that did really well, that got a lot of praise, and it's already in the gameplay style that does pretty well for multiplayer. Imagine everyone flying around with these weird abilities, magic, shooting things, lifting things up with telekinesis. It's kind of like Anthem, really. At least, that is what some people were probably thinking. Reality is a bit more unkind. Rather than having neat abilities that could have made the game feel, unique, or at least up to the same level as Anthem, yeah, it's not quite Anthem level. You instead are just basic guy with gun and some ability like a turret. This is a level of creativity that would have felt dated 2 decades ago. Look, if you're not familiar with Remedy games and you played this as your first one, you would never know this is a studio praised for innovation, or that it's a studio that is praised. There is a glut of cinematic narrative games that are barely tolerable solo and have no place trying to go live service, and yet every AAA studio is addicted to making these games due to critical success, because they are listening to critics and award ceremonies that are run by people who think movies are a higher form of art than games, and they want to be movie critics. But they've settled for games because they can't get into movie criticism. Critics will tolerate a 10-hour movie game that has a journalist difficulty mode, then give the game a 10 and nominate it for every reward, but big studios really want the live service money. Problem is, these people are not going to play a game long term. They will hype it to the moon and back every single time, but they won't play it or support it. Lesson learned, Concord? No. We're still going to go through with Marathon and Fair games? Well, You'll learn this lesson one of these days, old man. So how is it that you can take a game that supposedly has so many people invested in the lore of the world, because that is what Remedy does, it makes narrative games with worlds people are invested in, yet nobody was invested in it enough to even give it the slightest of a chance? Was this entire thing astroturfed? It is starting to feel like that's the case. SteamDB's transparency has shown all the games that journalists have been telling you are must-play, 10 out of 10, game of the year, masterpieces with huge followings, end up having zero actual, real interest. There's nothing better to show this phenomenon of something with massive critical and commercial success, yet lasting zero impact, than Avatar. Avatar is 2 of the best-selling movies of all time. We're talking blue space people, not the bald guy with the wind magic. They were made by a guy involved with Terminator and Aliens, which have insane levels of cultural proliferation. Yet, despite being so massive and having such high praise, Avatar stops mattering after it leaves theaters. It will vanish from the cultural landscape until the next movie comes out. Consider Ubisoft's Avatar game. Movie made $2 billion, yet all of 20 people care about it enough to play a game. Pretty sure more people played the Rocketeer game, and chances are you don't even know what that is. Perhaps this is a cinematic games experience in a nutshell. These games that get huge initial hype because they're meant for people who don't have time to play games, spending $80 for a 10-hour long handheld adventure, that sounds like a disaster for the average person with an empty wallet and little to do when they get home from their soul-crushing job. However, if you have 2 hours a week to play games due to responsibilities, family, or a crippling addiction to scrolling Twitter for 12 hours a day, that is a month's entertainment. Remedy gets a lot of praise, but you can see from FBC just how little anyone cares. Their world building cannot be utilized to get people to play a game by them that is anything other than narrative cinematic game. For all the fans of the studio, they didn't even show up to give this game a try. You were trying to make a time-consuming game for people who don't want to spend that time on a game in a friend slop genre without including the ability to randomly friend slop. Piece of advice, if you are so activist coded as a company, you do not want to make a game that has voice or even text chat out of fear that players might say a no-no word, maybe just do not make a co-op game. Marathon has this problem too. You are not going to make a friend slop game if you cannot even yell at the guy who keeps fraying himself or have a group chuckle over the guy that just fell through the floor. All of this is to say FBC through the lens of a journalist looks like a surefire thing. At the very least, it should have a high initial player base, at least in the 100k concurrent. The game didn't even break 2k players, and is barely hitting 200 a week and a half past launch. Yet every excuse they normally fall back on is gone to explain this one away. Well, it is on Game Pass. So was Claire Obscur and Oblivion. Those broke 100k. So there goes that old reliable. Perhaps game was overshadowed by other game. That's a big nope. What else came out right now that could crush this game? Mind's Eye? Splitgate 2? Speaking of, what happened to Splitgate? Did bowing to the cancel mob and getting on your knees to beg for forgiveness earn their favor? No? Wow. Big surprise. They are such a tolerant bunch. Would have thought that they would just praise you for your obedience. And before you start trying to blame Death Stranding 2, that just came out. NTR Firebreak had half a month to carve out its place. Oh wait, right. I forgot, there was a big game, the hugest of games, a game that everyone is talking about, a game that should not appeal to people because it commits the cardinal sin of woman pretty. Stellar Blade killed Firebreak. Problem solved, case closed. Maybe the West should just not put out games within a month of a game coming from a country that cares about making games. Would really save them the embarrassment. Splitgate 2, now laying off at least 100 people. Lost Records, which I covered a short while ago, Don't Nod and journalists praised it. Mass layoffs. Massive success does not lead to mass layoffs. Lies of P and Stellar Blade both got in the news recently for buying all of their staff not layoffs, but bonuses and Switch 2s. When Stellar Blade launched on PS5 a year ago, they bought all their staff a PS5. What leads to the so-called gaming industry collapse is a bunch of games being released by big studios that end up all being a huge waste of time. Yet the industry wants you to love these games that go nowhere. They give them all these awards, they call them games for impact, when they have no impact at all. Well, the successful games are from studios they want you to hate. They want you to think are doing a bad thing, are doing something that gamers will not like, something problematic. The media has now twice gone after Stellar Blade for the exact same thing, with the exact same lies, 2 years in a row, 2 launches in a row. You have studios making games that gamers want to buy. They are treating their staff well, with no sign of crunch, yet clear signs of rewards for jobs well done. They are hiring when journalists want to convince you the AAA record layoffs are just the industry being in a bad state. But these studios are not obeying their ideology or paying the blackmail, and that is all it takes for the media mafia to want you crushed. But they will praise the likes of a Concord. The activists will tell the studio, this is the future of gaming, all the way up to the inevitable loss of almost $500 million. Enough to fund a dozen games, like your Claire Obscure Black Myth or Baldur's Gate, or a few hundred indie titles. The journalists will play it, then try to convince you to throw your money away, giving trash games a 7, 8, or 9 out of 10, up until weeks later when they admit they never liked the game or never even played it. So they praise the likes of Concord. They tell the industry this is what will win you awards and get huge player bases. And studios listen. They listen all the way up to another massive studio flop, to layoffs, to shutdowns, and they never learn. So this game did not turn out like Anthem, perhaps because of Anthem's lessons, as well as the fall from grace for the journalist class. It turned out far worse. Before, this would have had major hype, a loyal fan base eager to play it day one, and all sorts of coverage blasting us with early review praise as the best game to ever happen. Well, they call the audience all sorts of names when they refuse to show up and play it. We would have had the cyberpunk treatment, with journalists trading their scraps of remaining ethics in to gloss over all the bad things. Now, people are willing to wait and see, and if it doesn't look good, they ignore it. Nobody even showed up for this game. That million activations is depending on them being on both console subscription services. So a bunch of people maybe played half an hour of the game and never touched it again. And this is a good thing. Not necessarily that JFK itself failed to drum up interest, but that gamers are getting smarter and more aware, are more resistant to the trickery and promises of games like Anthem and Cyberpunk, which has led to complete rejections of the likes of The Day Before, Mind's Eye, and FBC. Gamers deserve a transparent industry that caters to gamers. And the lesson has not yet been learned. But it will be. Or the people who are not learning it will no longer be around to not learn it. Either way, gamers win in the end. So like, comment, and subscribe, and journalists, before you get angry and blame gamers for this failure like you do everything else, yes, it's true. I caused ABC femboys to fail. And I apologize for absolutely nothing.